Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another Frequently Asked Question Friday. I'm here again with Daniel Covich.
Hello.
Who you guys may remember. He's our recurring lawyer that comes probably more than anybody else now.
I appreciate the invite.
So today, Daniel wanted to talk about commercial trucking cases and how they are handled differently than a regular auto collision case. You want to tell us how that is, Daniel?
You bet. Regular passenger vehicles, Greg, when they're in auto crashes, it's usually private person versus private person, and usually there's someone at fault for the accident. And the only regulation we really have is we have to all have valid driver's licenses and valid insurance. The trucking industry, though, is heavily regulated, and the trucking regulations are in place to make sure that these large trucking companies keep their equipment safe and maintained, and that these drivers are not overworked, and that they don't put in too many miles across the roadways of Texas and across the United States.
Okay. Is there anything we do differently when we like say first get a trucking or 18-wheeler case?
Absolutely. It's moving evidence, and just from the law of physics, usually a lot of times there's very little damage to an 18-wheeler, and there can be tremendous damage to your, mine, or someone else's or yours passenger vehicle. So what that means is that these trucks can technically keep moving, and they all have black boxes on them, similar to airplanes when an airplane goes down. And that black box has data in it, such as the speed immediately before the collision that an event occurred, actually has the crash event, whether or not a driver was belted, and it records, it has this material. The trick of it, and the needle that we thread very well here at Herrman Herrman, is understanding that we've got to file a temporary restraining order, some sort of restraining order, pretty darn quick, like immediately, because that data, the more the vehicle is used, the more the truck keeps getting used, it just kind of rolls over that data, and you could actually compromise and lose that data. On top of that, a lot of these trucks are interstate. They go state to state. So you have a crash on a Tuesday, and that truck could be in Florida or Montana by Thursday. And you've lost the ability to inspect that vehicle, to do the data download, and to just eyeball the equipment in general. So it's very important that we get to the truck very fast. And at a minimum, the truck companies are put on notice that we expect to be able to do a data download.
Yeah. So what if the truck does leave the state? Can we not get an injunction against the company to keep from it moving any further and make it stop so that we can go download it?
We do that often, and we ask them to basically just freeze it wherever it is. And that usually, once you file a restraining order, that stops them from making money using one of these multi-ton trucks, that gets their attention, and you'll get a call back. And then they'll try to work with you because they want to get that truck back on the road if they can, as soon as possible. So that does get the truck company's attention pretty quick. If it's already left the state, we can stop it pretty quick. Oftentimes, if it's a fatality, Texas DPS is pretty good. They can be very good at also getting a data download from the truck if it's an obvious fatality. The other thing that is very different for these truck cases versus private passenger vehicles is there's a requirement under certain conditions, and there's 3 or 4 of them, where the drivers must be drug and alcohol tested following a significant crash. And that has to happen within 48 hours. If a lot of times it's not there. And when it's not there, when they don't drug test the driver, it's, from our point of view, it's oftentimes intentional, and that's a big red flag that there was a problem with this driver. So that's the other thing, that if we're not in litigation over, if we don't file that TRO, we can't get that material. We can't find out the status of that driver.
Okay, and then I have a note here. You wanted me to ask you about the regulation of the truck industry.
Well, the trucking industry is heavily regulated, and there's both maintenance drivers, both the maintenance of the vehicles and the drivers are heavily regulated. There is a whole slew of what is considered a qualified driver under the both federal and state driver regulations. And a qualified driver must have, it's literally a checklist of about 15 items that must be in their file. And if those items are not in their file, then they are by statute an unqualified driver. And oftentimes what we find at Herrman Herrman when we get into these cases, and we start pulling out these blank documents, because we have every single one of the documents, we have the form of what they're supposed to have. If it's missing, then we take the position that at the date of the accident, at the time of the accident, that by federal and state statute, that driver was not qualified to drive a commercial vehicle on that day. And that's very important. And these regulations are here for a reason. The number of fatalities, Greg, this is from the federal statistics from the Department of Motor Vehicles and Transportation. And in 2014, there were over 30,000 deaths nationwide. In 2015, 32,000. In 2016, 34,000. What's scary about these fatalities is that the number keeps going up. Despite the lawsuits, despite the injunctions, the numbers of fatalities keep going up. And that's a bad thing. It needs to stop. I think all of us have been scared by these very, very large commercial vehicles.
You have a theory about why that is? Why the number of deaths keeps going up?
I think multiple reasons. I think one of the main ones is that overall we're seeing over the last 4 years a decrease in federal regulation of any industry, just under the current administration, good, bad, or ugly. I'm not commenting on it being good or bad. I'm just saying it's a fact. And so I think that there is less actual regulation enforcement. And I also think that that there's a lot more miles being put in by these trucks. There's a direct correlation between the number of trucks that a company has, the number of millions of miles that they cover across the United States, and the number of fatalities that they cause. So I just think these drivers are putting in too many hours. There's regulations on hours of service, 12 hours on, 6 hours off, and that's being violated. It's very commonly violated, and oftentimes it's not the truck driver's fault. It is the company pushing these men and women way too hard. That's what we see a lot of.
There's one party that just talks about getting rid of regulations all the time. Roll back regulations. That's what's choking America, choking the economy, ruining America. Lots of these regulations are put in place for good reasons.
And they came around for a reason. I mean, somebody just didn't decide that they wanted to regulate the trucking industry for no reason. It came up because there was a problem in the first place. Similar to, let's say, the Miranda warning where you read your rights. The reason it even came up is because there was a problem. Somebody's rights were violated. Similarly, with these trucking regulations, what we have found is if the regulations are not enforced, that these trucks are in very bad condition, the brakes are in very bad condition, and they're putting in way too many miles. And it's just not safe. These men and women are pushed way too hard. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of us have been up against not only a single trailer, but a double trailer, where you have two trailers and the truck driver and the unit. That is a huge amount of material going down the road. Very hard to stop, very similar to a train. You cannot stop on a dime. And the regulations are there to protect all the viewers. They're there to protect you and your children and your parents, your loved ones. This is one industry where regulation and enforcement of regulation is very needed and very important. And I often find that at the criminal end, while the criminal enforcement is good, their agenda is very different than ours. They may or may not do a black box download. They very seldom file a TRO to get hold of the vehicle. They really don't care for purposes of the criminal investigation about course and scope and whether or not somebody's working for a certain company and what the history of that company is. It doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is that event. And that's a very important thing, and they're very good at what they do, but they've got blinders on, and that's all they do. And what we do at Herrman Herrman is we look at a much broader picture of the company to see what they're doing across the United States over a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period. And that's a much broader investigation than what's done by the state agencies.
What's the risk to the public from large commercial trucks?
You know, there was over 17,000 people injured last year by commercial trucks just in Texas. In 2017, there were 761 people killed. There was one single deathless day in Texas last year for a commercial vehicle accident, not a single day. And that's the risk.
All right, and finally, truck company versus truck driver.
Yeah.
Which is the problem?
The truck company. These drivers are, these men and women, oftentimes are really just trying to make a living. And one of the things that we see is the motivation. They're literally told times to keep 2 sets of logs. There's the log books that they show the trooper, and then there's the log books that actually show the number of miles they've done. And what we've done, and we've had fun with it here at Herrman Herrman, and I don't know, making light of it, but as an attorney, we enjoy the chess game. You look at like a load from Texas to California, and you look at how many hours on versus how many hours off, and you calculate the number of hours on that they're supposed to be on and not supposed to be driving off, like these are the off hours on paper, and they had to be doing 140 miles an hour. The only way that they could have taken that off time and made it in the time period that they got from Texas to California is if they're going 140 miles an hour. Well, what does that mean? It means that they drove during their off status. The required status that they're supposed to be resting, they're driving, but the logs say otherwise. The other problem is a lot of these companies pay these men and women by the load. So it's to their economic benefit, and they're just trying to pay their bills like everybody else. But it's to their economic benefit to do as many loads as possible in a day or in a week so they make more money. And there needs to be more streamlined regulation of all that. The companies, really the bottom line is profit. You look at the amount of money that they make versus the amount of money that they spend on training or on resting their drivers, and it's minuscule. So maybe 1% of their profits is spent doing the right thing.
Okay. Well, thank you. Our time's up. Thank you for that, Daniel. Let me just mention a couple of have a couple announcements. The first one is our Instagram winner is Amanda Alanis. Please, Amanda, get a hold of the office. You can reach out to us on Facebook, or you can call the office. What's that?
Or on Instagram.
Or Instagram. And just let us know when you can come by and get your gift card. Secondly, I want to mention our scholarship again. Deadline to enter is December 1st. First prize $2,500, second prize $1,500, third prize $1,000. Anybody can enter. You just got to write an essay. So please go online at our scholarship page, HerrmanHerrman.com scholarship. Again, we're tired of people from California winning this or New York winning this. We'd really like some local people entering and winning. So, it doesn't take that long to go write an essay. And it'll certainly help you with school. So, please avail yourself of opportunity to win the money. And lastly, again, I want to talk about voter registration. I mention this every week, but I think it's getting really critical. I think this is going to be the most important election of our lives. There are people saying that if Republicans win back the House of Representatives, that's kind of it for our democracy, because Trump's never going to get impeached. He's never going to get indicted. He's never going to leave office. He's already said that he may have to postpone the 2020 elections because there's so much voter fraud, which we know is complete BS. But that's what's probably coming next, is if they can't rig these elections through Facebook and Twitter and breaking into voting boxes, they will probably just postpone the 2020 elections indefinitely, which means Trump becomes a dictator, which I think we can all see that that's what he really wants. He wants absolute power. And I think it's very likely to happen. So the only way really to stop this is to have the Democrats take over the House of Representatives so they can actually impeach Trump and get him out of office. So if you're as disgusted with Trump's behavior and his, selling out to Vladimir Putin and believing Putin over what U.S. intelligence agencies tell him, we all know Putin's got something on him. We just don't know what it is, whether it's the P-tape or what it is. We know Putin's got something on him. But we need to get this guy out of office before he and the alt-right try to take over America. So please, even though you think you're registered to vote, go double check, because you may not be. Texas does what Ohio does, and it purges people from the voter rolls that haven't voted in a while. And as you recall, we talked about last week, U.S. Supreme Court upheld that when Ohio did it. And so, you may have been purged from the voter registration rolls. I told y'all 2 years ago, people here went to vote and they thought they were registered. Lo and behold, election day, they're not registered, they can't vote. So don't just assume you're registered to vote. Chris will put that link up again. Y'all can check, make sure you're registered. If not, now's a good time to go register to vote. Don't wait till the last second, because you're going to run out of time. I think October 9th is the last day to register to vote if you want to vote in this election. I know October 22nd is the first day of early voting. But I think October 9th, and I may be wrong about that, but I think that's the last day to register to vote. So go ahead and check now. It's going to be September here in a few weeks, so you're running out of time. And then just finally, I will not be here the next 2 Fridays, so we will see you guys again in, I guess, 3 weeks. So thank you very much. And Daniel, thanks for being here again. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And see you in 3 weeks. Same time, same channel.